we have been discussing about the Middle Greek philosophers, and we begin today with the doyen of Middle Greek philosophy, and that is Socrates. This is Dr. Ananya Barua, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy, Hindu College. Now, whenever we talk about Socrates, there is this trilogy that comes to our mind: Socrates, Plato and Aristotle. And this trilogy is what makes sense mostly in the Middle Greek philosophy phase. The familiar trilogy people often name as the heart of the classical or Middle Greek philosophy, and they are Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Each is best understood in relation to the others. Socrates as the ethical questioner, Plato as the metaphysical system builder who preserves and develops a Socratic inquiry in dialogue form, and Aristotle as the empirical analyst and systematizer who critiques Plato and creates a very different philosophical perspective. Socrates. Socrates, about 469 to 399 BCE, the public ethical examiner. Little, if any, written work by him survives, unfortunately. Our knowledge comes mainly from Plato, Xenophon, and the comic poet Aristophanes. He makes moral inquiry central, insists on definitions of virtues, and practices the dialectical question-driven investigation that bears his name. Plato, 47 to 347 BCE. Socrates' most famous student is Plato. He converts the Socratic questioning into written dialogues and develops a positive metaphysics, theory of forms, an epistemology, recollection, dialectic, and a full political theory, the Republic. In many dialogues, Plato presents Socrates as protagonist, but scholars debate where Socratic ends and Plato's own doctrine begins. The difference is very blurred. Aristotle, 384–322 BCE. Plato's a student who rejects central Platonic metaphysics, the separate forms, emphasizes empirical investigation and classification, and builds a formal logic, causal theory, the four causes, the material cause, the formal cause, the efficient cause, and the final cause, and a virtue ethics grounded in human flourishing, eudaimonia. He treats Plato as an important predecessor and Socrates mostly through Plato's portraits. Now, let's see more in depth about Socrates' philosophy. At core, Socratic philosophy is ethical and epistemic. The main task of philosophy is to care for the soul by discovering what is true about virtue, justice, pity, courage, and so on. That project rests on these interlocking commitments. Number one, the priority of the examined life. The unexamined life is not worth living. Philosophy is not intellectual ornament. It is practical and transformative. Ethical intellectualism. Right action depends on knowledge. To know the good is, in principle, to do the good. Many Socratic utterances imply that vice is a result of ignorance. Search for universal definitions. Instead of relying on examples or popular opinion, Socrates presses for precise universal accounts of ethical terms. For example, what is justice? Moral psychology and the care of the soul. He said that moral improvement is like health of the soul. Truth and self-knowledge matter morally. Skeptical, critical stance towards received opinion, conventional wisdom, and rhetorical persuasion are suspect or dubious. Careful questioning is needed. Now, if we are to get back to the background of Socrates, we see that he was born sometime in 470 BCE. Some say he was born in 469 BCE in Athens. And family, majorly people say that his father was Sophroniscus, a stone mason or a sculptor. Mother was Phenerete, a midwife, and the social class that he belonged to was the demers or the common citizens, not necessarily aristocracy. Marriage and children, he did marry Xanthippe, with whom he had 3 sons. Athens at this time of Socrates was at its cultural and political height, the golden age of Pericles, flowering of art, drama, and democracy. Socrates was part of this ferment. Now, how did Socrates get influenced or inclined towards philosophy? The first thing first. Several influences shaped his philosophical turn. The first, the Oracle of Delphi, which had been his turning point. According to Plato's Apology, Socrates' friend Xenophon once asked the Delphic oracle if anyone was wiser than Socrates. The oracle answered, "No one is wiser than Socrates." And Socrates was puzzled. He did not consider himself wise. To test the oracle, he began questioning politicians, poets, and craftsmen. He found that they thought they knew but did not, whereas he knew that he did not know. This led to his mission to expose ignorance and awaken self-knowledge. Sophists and Athenian culture. Athens was full of sophists, professional teachers of rhetoric and persuasion. Unlike the sophists who taught for money and focused on winning arguments, Socrates sought truth and moral clarity. He developed his own style of questioning, the elenches, moving beyond mere rhetoric to genuine inquiry into virtue and the good life. The personal temperament and vocation, we see that Socrates was known for extreme self-discipline, endurance, and indifference to wealth or status. His mother's profession as a midwife inspired his metaphor of philosophy as intellectual midwifery or maieutic method, helping others give birth to ideas. His own inner daemon or the guiding divine sign warned him against wrong actions, reinforcing his sense of being on a divine mission to pursue philosophy. Now, why did he become a philosopher instead of, say, following his father's footsteps, a mason or a sculptor? Tradition says that he was trained as a sculptor under his father. Some statues were even attributed to him. But instead of continuing that craft, he turned to sculpting souls. His dissatisfaction with unexamined life and the lure of superficial success pushed him towards philosophy. Now, Socrates' philosophical vocation, in his own words as an apology, within quotes, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Philosophy was not a hobby but a divine mission assigned by the Delphic oracle and guided by his inner voice. He believed he was a gadfly sent by the gods to sting Athens into moral self-examination. Also, before we begin with the philosophy of Socrates, let us see what was his death account, or how did Socrates die. Historically, the context states that in 399 BCE, after the Peloponnesian War, Athens was politically unstable. Socrates had made enemies by questioning traditional gods. He was charged with impiety and corrupting the youth. Further, for exposing the ignorance of powerful politicians, being associated unfairly with controversial figures and certain names that ultimately led to his downfall. The charges against Socrates, as mentioned or told in Plato's Apology in the trial, were impiety, which is not recognizing the city's gods and introducing new divinities, and corrupting the youth, teaching them to question authority. Socrates defended himself brilliantly, but refused to flatter the jury or beg for acquittal. He argued he was fulfilling a divine mission as a gadfly to Athens. The verdict and sentence: the jury, about 501 citizens, found him guilty by a narrow margin. For sentencing, Socrates ironically suggested he deserved free meals for life, like Olympic victors, angering the jury. The final sentence: death by drinking hemlock, the poison. Now, the death scene of Socrates, as recounted in Plato's Phaedo, is summed up a little here. Socrates calmly discussed the immortality of the soul with his friends before drinking the hemlock. He died serenely, reinforcing his belief that a philosopher should not fear death. His last words, according to Plato, was, within quotes, "Crito, we owe a cock to Asclepius, pay the debt and do not neglect it," unquote. This cryptic remark is often interpreted as thanking the god of healing, Asclepius, as though that itself were a cure for the sickness of life. Socrates' death became the ultimate symbol of philosophy's commitment to truth over life itself. Now, why was Socrates' methodology called midwifery? Socrates himself described his method as a kind of metic art. Metike means midwifery, inspired by his mother's profession as a midwife. A midwife, as we understand the idea, does not give birth herself, but helps others bringing forth their children. Similarly, Socrates claimed he had no wisdom of his own to teach. Instead, he helped others to give birth to the truth that was already within them. And how does this midwifery process work? Socrates would ask probing questions, exposing contradictions in persons' beliefs, elenches. Through dialogue, the person would struggle, revise, and clarify their own ideas. The birth was the moment of genuine insight, the soul delivering truth. Why does this matter? It reverses the idea of teacher as authority. Instead, the learner carries the seed of truth. Socratic philosophy is not indoctrination but awakening. It stresses self-knowledge, critical thinking, and inner discovery over passive learning. Socrates died in 399 BCE, as mentioned, by drinking hemlock and after being condemned for impiety and corrupting the youth. His calm acceptance made his death a model of philosophical courage. His methodology is thus called midwifery because, like a midwife, he did not give birth to truth himself, but helped others bring out the knowledge latent within them through questioning. Now let us discuss the methodology of Socrates. Socrates' methodology, the dialectical toolbox. Socrates' method is often called the elenches, or refutation, and is accompanied by metics, or the midwifery, and irony. A typical sequence, which is elenches, refutation, midwifery, metics, and irony. He first begins with a question. Socrates asks for a general definition, not just examples. Say, what is X? X could be, what is pity, what is friendship, what is courage? And the interlocutor offers a definition or example, often a confident claim. That's when Socrates' questioning or cross-examination starts ticking. Socrates draws out consequences, asks for implication, tests the proof proposal against counterexamples or logical questions. Refutation or elanches, it is a contradiction or implausible consequence which is revealed. The interlocutor's account is shown to be incoherent or insufficient. This typically leads to aporia, which is the puzzlement or intellectual impasse. Then the may take turn sometimes, where Socrates may then help the interlocutor to be a better have a grasp by suggesting definitions, distinguishing terms, or according to Plato, leading them towards recollection or clearer forms. And then sometimes a more constructive move. In some dialogues, Socrates offers a positive account following elanches. In others, the dialogue ends in aporia. So the key features of Socrates' method is number one, irony, where Socrates often professes ignorance. His statement, I know that I know nothing, which disarms opponents and encourages them to be the state in their views fully. Non-dogmatism. This method is crucial and critical rather than dogmatic. Its first aim is to clear away error. Dialectic assent. By rejecting bad accounts, one is supposed to be prepared to seek better, more universal answers. Now, with this, I think we are good to study or see how the antithesis of the dialectic methodology, which we have just about described, were or who were the propounders of the non-dialectical methodology, or the antagonists of the Socratic tradition. They were the sophists. So the question right now is, who were the sophists? Sophists were the professional teachers in 5th century BCE Athens. They taught rhetoric or rhetoricism, persuasion, and practical skills for success in politics and laws. They charged fees, unlike Socrates, who refused payment. Some of the famous sophists are Protagoras, man is the measure of all things, of all that is, of all that is not, it is not. Gorgias, Hippias, Prodicus. Their main emphasis was winning arguments and achieving practical success rather than seeking absolute truth. Now, why was Socrates against them? The main bone of contention between the Socratic philosophers and the sophists were truth versus persuasion. The sophists focused on rhetoric, which was the art of making the weaker arguments appear stronger, convincing the audience regardless of truth. Socrates, on the other hand, insisted philosophy must seek truth and wisdom, not just persuasion. Philosophical issue is, the question, is there an objective truth about justice, virtue, and the good life, or is everything relative to opinion and context? This brings us to the second part of the discussion, which is relativism versus moral absolutism. Now, the founder or the upholder of the sophists' school, Protagoras, had stated man is the measure of all things, suggesting that truth and morality are relative to each person or culture. Socrates believed in universal moral truths, virtue, justice, goodness, discoverable through reason and dialectic. The philosophical issue is thus, can ethics be grounded in universal principles, or is it always subjective and relative? Now, this brings us to the epic binary of knowledge versus opinion. For the sophists, who were equated or who did equate success with clever argument, regardless of whether it revealed genuine knowledge, Socrates distinguished between doxa or opinion and episteme, knowledge. Philosophy for him was about moving beyond shifting opinions to secure knowledge of the good. Philosophical issue here is philosophy about acquiring wisdom, truth, or about skillful opinion making, rhetoric. Further, we come to the binary of education as transaction versus moral mission. For the sophists, education as a service for money, training citizens to be effective in courts and politics. For Socrates, education as soul care, a divine mission, not something to be sold. The philosophical issue is education about empowerment for worldly success or about inner transformation towards virtue? Now, the philosophical illustration or the example from Plato's dialogues, the Gorgias dialogues, Socrates debates Gorgias, the sophists, about rhetoric. Gorgias was the one who said that rhetoric is a powerful skill that gives influence in politics. For Socrates, rhetoric without truth is like cookery compared to medicine. Now, cookery makes food taste good but does not promote health. Medicine aims at health, whether pleasant or bitter. Similarly, rhetoric aims at pleasure, winning over the audience, while philosophy aims at truth and the soul's health. Thus, the bone of contention is the purpose of speech and argument to win sophists or to heal and guide by the soul towards truth, which was Socrates, is the main question. I repeat, is the purpose of speech and argument to win, which was the sophist's methodology, or to heal and guide the soul towards truth? Socrates' methodology was the main bone of contention. So, in summary, Socrates opposed the sophists because they prized persuasion over truth, they embraced relativism, he sought universals, they confused opinion with knowledge, they sold out education. He saw philosophy as a sacred mission. So, the philosophical core, we see that for sophists, philosophy was all about rhetoric and power. For Socrates, philosophy is all about truth and care of the soul. We will be continuing more of this Socrates sophists debate in our next lecture. Thank you so much.